What's up, Internet? You're tuned in to episode 86 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy.
Ahoy, ahoy, Max. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was a busy week last week, but I'm glad to be back and glad that there's lots to talk about.
Yeah, you picked a good week to come back. We've got rumors of a Jet Set Radio and Persona 3 remakes to kick the show off. We're going to talk about, again, another hot rumor that apparently PlayStation's got a new handheld on the way, but maybe in a bit of a monkey paw situation. Maybe cloud streaming only, and we'll talk all about that and a lot more on this week's show. So, we got a jam-packed one for you. So I'm ready to jump right into it, man, because just breaking earlier today with some of this stuff, but rumbling the last few days, we've been hearing about some hot new remakes. Jet Set Radio, of course, a beloved Sega release from back in the generation, 6 consoles, right? It was
on the Dreamcast. No one knows
Dreamcast
what the numbers mean. No one knows what the numbers mean, Pete. Just say the console you mean. Also, just
it was a Dreamcast game.
Quick correction on that. I don't think Jet Set Radio is specifically a remake. It seems to be a reboot. It seems like a new game based on some of the stuff we've seen.
Okay. Well, you put the show notes together, so you set me up for that failure. I just want to point that out.
I actually put new Jet Set Radio and a Persona 3 remake. Those are two separate.
Okay. All right. Okay. Take two. Okay, we're going to kick things off. We got a brand new game in the Jet Set Radio franchise, a reboot of sorts, and Persona 3 potentially getting a remake. These have both gotten some steam on social media over the last couple of days as we've seen some purportedly leaked footage of both of these, right? We had Twitter user AV to Game, no Nami. Right?
That's probably... Yeah, I think that's right. No Yami, I think. But yeah, I mean...
Oh, no, yeah, no Yami. No Yami.
I don't know who No Yami is, or I don't know. I mean, it's just, I saw a lot of letters. I didn't even have a stab at it before when I was writing it down, so you've done a good job for your first try.
I nailed it, I think. I think I did a good job there.
Yeah.
So anyway, they posted a video on Sunday, originally, which shows...
yesterday for us.
Yeah, right as of the time of this recording yesterday, but by the time you're probably listening to this, it's been a day or two. It's got Yukari, who's a character from Persona 3, firing some magical arrows in footage that looks, more modern than what we know Persona 3 looks like. Which again, right, like there is also kind of multiple versions of Persona 3, so like that's a whole other thing. But it definitely has that more modern look to it, right? Of what we've seen in some of the more recent Persona releases. And if you guys are over on YouTube right now, I'll give you guys a look at the footage. But definitely looks more akin to, I think, like a Persona 5 or, or even, some of the like Heroes games, stuff like that. Or not Heroes, what is it? Persona 5 Strikers, right? But same, you know what I mean. There is definitely something, right, seemingly going on here. It's interesting because obviously, we did just get Persona 3 re-released on multiple platforms between Steam and Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo. So, Persona 3 has not been more available than it is right now in quite some time. But the thing that I think is kind of interesting is the version that has been made available is Persona 3 Portable, which is quite a bit different if you are, familiar with Persona 3 at all, right? The original game was out on PS2, and it is more akin to, I would say, like a modern Persona game where like it's full 3D open environments that you explore, whereas Persona 3 Portable is the same story and a lot of the same gameplay beats and all that stuff with a lot of changes, right? Like full control of your party and some stuff like that. But the biggest change is that rather than it being like full 3D explorable environments, it had a more like visual novel type style where like you would go to places and cutscenes would trigger rather than you kind of like going through the exploration in a more full space. Yeah, so it's quite a bit different when you get right down to it. And the Persona community is pretty split on what is, there are some folks who say the original is the best version because of that. There's some people who say that Persona 3 Portable is the best version because not only in addition to the party control, there's also a whole other second character you can play as a female character who has like different confidants and different romance options, and like it's effectively like a totally second experience in its own right.
Is this the character we've seen in this footage? Is that Yakami, or is that a different character to
I believe, and this is where I'm going to show my Persona ignorance because I am a newer fan, right? Jumping on with Royal, I believe. Yes, that is the case. So Yukari
Okay.
Takaba is how I'm going to say that. Yukari Takaba
Okay.
is one of the playable characters, but it doesn't say if she's the protagonist.
Okay.
No, she can't be because she's in the regular one, and right, and Portable is the one where you Okay, I think I'm right about this. Persona expert Zayd Ida can write in and correct me if I'm messing it up here. But what I'm looking at here is I believe she is one of the like, members of your squad in Persona 3.
The female protagonist is Kotone Shiomi or Kotone. So yeah,
Okay,
that's not Yukami. That Yukami
perfect.
is someone else. Okay, cool.
So good. We're confirmed on that one then. So we got it.
Cool.
So yeah, this is an interesting one because I think there are a lot of folks that do want to see the older Persona games get remade in the modern style with some of the quality of life functionality that we've come to expect, as well as just some of the other updates to gameplay and stuff like that that weren't in previous entries. That I think if you're someone like me and a lot of folks who became new Persona fans with 5 or with Royal, I've heard some people say that going back to some of those older games is like, I don't want to say tough because I think that maybe exaggerates the difficulty, but that you miss those quality of life changes, and that there is like a lot of stuff that you'll be used to from Persona 5 that you won't necessarily get in Persona 3 or Persona 4. So I could definitely see this being true, where they're like, hey, we've made the original legacy versions more widely available. We're exposing more people to those classic entries. And then now we have kind of an opportunity to release them and get people who don't want to miss out on those quality of life
Hmm.
updates to come back and give it a shot. And then all the people that have played the original versions will come back and play it again, you know, ideally, right?
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, like, why have they re-released a game that's seemingly just been, or why are they re-releasing a game that's seemingly just been re-released? But I didn't know that these Portal versions or the versions that have come out aren't the originals or aren't in the same style as Persona. I
At
did not
least for
realize.
Persona 3. Because
Okay.
Persona 4 Golden is the Vita version, but my understanding is it's not limited in that same way.
Okay. Well, I guess it was different back then that with a PS2, trying to put a PS2 game on like I don't know, the 3DS, whatever the portable PSP, whatever the portable version came out on. I can imagine. Sorry, it would be PSP, wouldn't it? I can imagine that would be a lot
Yeah.
harder than sort of having a more parodied version. So that makes sense. But I think that there's also something else to add on to this, specifically this one, is that there was a Persona P3RE.jp was a domain was registered last March.
Okay.
Was under the same provider as Persona 5 Royal Domain. And I'm pretty sure the Persona 5 Royal Domain, when that was first, when it was like P5R or whatever, people were thinking it was going to be on the Switch or um, obviously now it is. But I remember that being something people were talking about. And it seems to be the case again here that there is a domain for p3re.jp. So I think this is probably going to be real. I think the chances of this being legit are pretty high because, like you say, it can't be footage of the older game. The game that's just come out recently because it looks more modern than we've seen before, and it's not like the same game. So
Yeah, and I mean, like the
yeah, it's good to me.
The P3 portable port, to my knowledge, doesn't have full scale character models like that. It is all like
Right.
the
Okay.
drawings because it's the more visual novel style.
Right.
Like,
Okay.
even in gameplay, they don't look like that. So it's got to be something, whether it's a
Yeah.
P3 proper P3 remake or maybe another spin-off title or something like that.
Yeah.
it looks like it has to be new footage. But given that
Yeah.
context of the domain and the fact that like multiple other people are like, coming forward and um, kind of pointing out all of these little things that seem to point to there being fire where there's this smoke
Yeah.
is pretty exciting because I have really wanted to go back and play Persona 3 and Persona 4 and kind of expand my relationship to the franchise because of how much I love Royal. And like I am happy to go back and play the original versions, but if they are going to bring out a remake that is going to make it more consistent in style with what I like about Persona 5, I mean, that'd be great. That would be a great opportunity for me to jump in as a newer player and
Yeah.
kind of experience these games in a way that'll probably click with me a little bit more and won't have as much opportunity for friction.
Yeah. I think it's annoying for people that have maybe been waiting for these remakes or maybe haven't played Persona 5 like you and have gone back to play 3, that now there's gonna be a better version of 3 coming out. Then again, they're also probably gonna be excited to be able to replay the game in a better way anyway. So I guess it's sort of like win-win really for everyone involved. However,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I
it's
think
not
that's probably true.
just it's not just the fact that there's all of these other, reasons that it's real. It's that this footage comes pretty much directly uh, hand in hand with the new Jet Set Radio that was leaked in the same way. So the footage also
Right.
included um, character called Beat from Jet Set Radio dancing. But it's new footage again. It's not the same. It's not footage we've seen before, or it sort of looks almost, it looks like more modern footage than we're used to. And the guy who posted it, or the person who posted it, AV no game no yami two game. Oh, I messed it up. Whatever. AV to game no yami said that the footage is from Sega Japan's internal meeting held in 2021. So it's a couple of years old at this point. This footage, if that's the case. But it seems to actually be that the um, footage came from a Swagbucks survey that Sega put out. I had to look at what Swagbucks was when I put this together. Swagbucks seems to be like so you can sign up to Swagbucks and become, or you receive customer surveys. You can receive like consumer stuff. They'll send you stuff, and you become what's that? Is that the right consumer
It's like
surveys, customer surveys?
I get what you mean. Yeah, it's one of those companies where like they'll send you surveys about consumer products to
Yeah,
like gauge interest and
yeah,
control like how they create marketing
yeah,
campaigns.
yeah.
And
So
then
Sega would
like
have gone. Sorry, gone.
you as doing that, you get like gift cards and stuff in
Yeah,
return.
yeah. So Sega would go to Swagbucks and say, send out a survey to users that maybe fit a certain demographic. They'll get that survey and then they'll use that data, right? It saves Sega having to pull a bunch of people in themselves and organize a whole day when they can get a company to do it remotely. So I know that there was a Swagbucks survey that Sega put out. I don't know any more detail other than that, but that footage seemed to be in that Swagbucks survey. So maybe it was left in as an insight from a marketing guy.
And similarly to this, this was how Armored Core had some footage
Mhm.
that leaked early.
I think it was
Was that
2020.
last year, earlier this
Last
year?
year,
Who
yeah,
remembers? But
it was the start of last year, yeah.
there was that Armored Core footage that leaked, and it was the same source where it was a consumer survey being put out,
Yep,
I guess probably to gauge interest and things like that. And
yep,
someone took a screenshot and put it out.
yes, yeah, which I think is, you're generally probably under some sort of NDA, but I guess if you're, uh or you should be under NDA, but if you're just doing, like, these surveys on the side or whatever, maybe you just do it for a little bit of extra cash. You don't really care, are you? They're not
Yeah,
gonna
and it's
sue
like
you really, are they? So
yeah, it's like I wonder how easy it is to do that with a certain amount of anonymity because it's like, well, you're one of how many thousands of people that took that
yeah,
survey, and then you screenshot it and post it under an anonymous Reddit account with a different IP address or
yeah,
something, and then it's like, okay, cool. Like, how can they connect that back to you
yeah,
when
exactly.
you're one of thousands of people that maybe saw this image?
Yep. So yeah, that seems to be fairly legit if that's the case. There's also even more information about this Jet Set Radio game. There's a Twitter user called excuse me, sorry, I've clicked on the wrong thing. Genki
JPN,
Japan. Yeah,
yeah,
Genki JPN. Seemed to just post. I think it's probably based on these images or these videos being leaked. They posted an image of Jet Set Radio characters. Not that we've seen before from what I can tell, not that I'm sort of I know that I'm like you, there's not
uh,
a huge amount
I
of
am also not a
experience with
big
it.
Jet Set Radio guy, but my understanding is I think that this person in the center is the main character.
Yeah, that's Beat, I think, is the character maybe.
Yeah.
And then the other two are probably also characters of the game. It's really hard to talk about these things you don't really know, but they've also included next to that a picture of a real place, a real photo of the place in Shibuya that this seems to be modeled after. Um, and some of the stuff in the background in the real life, there's like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet you can see, and it all matches up pretty well. Um, and this is a watermarked image, so someone's posted this and wants credit for it, I assume. But yeah, it seems like
Or again, because it was part of this marketing material, it's covered in watermarks to
yeah, that could be it. Yeah.
because like I don't if you are ever somebody who gets exposed to material like this early, like I can talk about this. Yeah, I can talk about this now. I'm not under NDA anymore. I used to see screeners, right?
Mhm.
Of like films or television shows early, and you would often get stuff like this that is like covered in watermarks or things like that. To basically do this, right? So that if
Mhm.
somebody leaks it, it's obscured, it's not high resolution. The
Yep.
photo I just showed everybody is very grainy, you know.
Uh-huh.
So it's yeah, I'm sure that that's probably due to the origin, the source of the image
Yep.
is not a high res one. So, and
But
it's
it
a
looks
screenshot that then got compressed and shared on Twitter.
yeah, of course, yeah. But I mean, it looks legit. It looks good. So I mean, also there's also Japanese text and all these sort of bits of footage to say in development at the moment. So I guess you can say that yeah, that's uh, not supposed to have been shown, or it's not supposed to sort of be for consumption. Sorry, I'm just watching the footage here to try and see if the design from the image actually matches up with the design for the video for this Jet Set Radio one, and it does. Yeah, so the footage of the character Beat dancing for all of 5 seconds matches up with the design of this image. So the two are clearly linked in some way. Um, yeah, that's that
Pretty
that all
wild.
that locks out for me. I don't know where I've or why I've sort of got it in my head that it's a new game, and I guess it's because the character looks so different, looks older. It seems to be set in a new. It seems like Shibuya isn't the setting of the normal Jet Set Radio, and that's why them being the characters all being in this sort of remade Shibuya is worth mentioning because it's different and it's not what we expect or what the fans expect from the series so far. So I think that's what gives the sort of credence to it being a new game rather than um, a remake or something.
In addition to that, there is also, and I had forgotten about this actually, but the article I'm looking at here from Video Games Chronicle reminded me, and this one comes from Chris Scullion over at VGC. So shout out to Chris. There was a report from Bloomberg last year that Sega
Oh,
had plans to have big budget reboots of both Crazy Taxi and Jet Set Radio.
oh, there we go.
So there we
Maybe
go.
this is part of that then. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, you got to
Well,
imagine, right?
so does this mean that Crazy Taxi's also real? If this was sort of real and we've just not seen that? Do you think maybe
I
that's
would
just
think
something
so.
that's not
Yeah.
included?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just that this one is the first one that's going to come across the bow, and that Crazy Taxi is like still in development, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. Because I know that of course, we've been talking off and on the last couple weeks about like the death of E3, and that Sega was one of those companies that had a planned E3 presence and pulled out, and that had to be pretty devastating if these were the things that they were going to come packed with to
Yeah.
announce, because these would be
If
some pretty big things,
yeah, if they had a big
particularly if
E3
they had
planned.
something playable.
Yes. Yeah, if they had a big E3 planned, which from the sounds of it, if both of these games are real and could be shown this year, and there could also be Crazy Taxi, that's a pretty big event for Sega, who maybe haven't really had a huge showing in quite a while. Maybe like I can't think of anything I've done in recent years, other than Sonic, that's been and the Persona games, but they've always been partnered with other people.
Yeah.
They've always been partnered with. I remember the Persona games were announced at an Xbox event, and
Yeah, they're not
things like
usually
that.
one to like have their own event as much as they are to like, have their big stuff come out and be a splash at somebody else's event.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the fact they were planning on having a presence of their own, I think it says that they're maybe planning a big comeback. Not a big comeback, they're bringing back these IP, they're bringing back these new games, and that this was all supposed to be a part of E3. Whether we still see it this year, maybe not part of E3, but a part of their own event or a separate event, or they, again, if they decide to actually call up Sony or Microsoft and go, can I quickly, I know I said no, but can I hop in with these games now that we don't
Yeah.
have a space to really show? Could be
Yeah,
the case.
or an opening night live with Jeff
Hmm.
and, something like that. Like, I
Yeah.
think any of these things, if we can get a Persona 3 trailer during opening night live or at the PlayStation event or something like that, sure. Yeah. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, those would definitely be big announcements that I think carry weight for sure.
Hmm. And I think
And I mean,
with
who's to say it could have been that was their plan originally anyway, was that like they were going to have those announcements as part of other showcases and then they would just have playable demos on the
that's
floor.
true.
Cause,
Yeah.
last year at Days of Play, the live event, the in-person event for Summer Games Fest, Sonic Frontiers was one of the big games that was being showcased there.
Hmm.
So it's certainly not without precedent for Sega to be one of the companies that, has kiosks at the event for people to check out the software.
Yep, and I think it's we spoke. I think we spoke. I don't know if it was with you before, but we spoke about Konami having sort of a new Castlevania game or new Metal Gear Solid, or having more of an E3 presence. I know last week you and Steve spoke about Konami sort of having a bit of a comeback and pushing new
Right.
studios and things like that. It seems like E3 was the stage for them to do that, maybe specifically in the West, I guess. And that without E3, maybe they've had to replan or restructure. And it seems like Sega was doing the same thing. And it actually seems like with the stuff that has leaked, that this was going to be a pretty good year for E3, that it was going to be, haven't had a show for a few years. Konami's here with all your favorites. Sega's here with some sort of surprise classics returning. And yeah, it does seem a
Yeah.
shame that it's sort of gone.
I feel like those things as part of a broader show that has the stuff that you come to expect. I think it could have been a big showing that made people feel like E3 was relevant again. But
Mhm.
alas, obviously that's not how it played out. And I mean, did Sega pull out because they smelled the blood in the water and realized that E3 was not worth it for them? Or is it maybe that some of these things that they thought they were going to have to show are not as ready to be shown as they think, or as they thought? And
Yeah, that's also true.
they don't want to announce stuff early, right? They want to make sure that when they announce it, um, they have a clear marketing cadence and they don't end up in a situation like with Sonic Frontiers where, there is like, is this game going to get delayed? Is it not? Is it this? Is it that? Um, I wouldn't be surprised if they want to take things a little bit slower since they are going through the trouble of trying to revive these big historic franchises. You want to come correct, right? You want that
Yes.
first time that you see it to be like, holy crap, Jet Set Radio is back. Oh my God, like Crazy Taxi looks incredible. This
Mhm.
Persona 3 remake looks incredible, Um, those
Do you think you
are
could have that anymore now that we're sort of prepped for these things? We've got.
I think we still see them. It's just a matter of when, I guess, right? Because like
Mhm.
if there is if
No, I
there
mean,
is
sorry. I mean,
oh sorry, yeah.
can they have that same impact? Can we still have the wow,
Mm, mm.
this looks like this? Now that we've sort of been prepped, we've sort of been given the nudge like, hey, these things are coming, expect them. And, when they're announced, are we still going to go, whoa? Or are we going to
I
go, yeah, all right?
I think it's a mixed bag, right? I think these kinds of announcements, like you want to keep them close to your chest. It's always more exciting to be at one of these events and have something pop off and be like, "Oh my God, we didn't, there was no way we could have known that was going to happen." But I don't really know that these were in that category anyway. The idea of remakes of Persona games has been discussed and rumored for a while, and Sega themselves told us that they wanted to reboot Jet Set Radio, right? So the idea that this now kind of makes it a thing that's like on our minds, where like anytime we go into an event, if we know Sega's going to be there, it's like, are we going to see Jet Set? Are we going to see
Yeah.
this? Are we going to see that? Um, it's interesting because I think if they announce it in June, I do think some of the wind is maybe taken out of the sails a little bit. I think the people that are going to get excited are going to get excited. The Persona fans of the world are going to explode either way, right? Knowing doesn't really decrease that excitement. And I think of something like Metroid Prime Remaster, which we knew
Yeah.
about for what, 4 years, and it was like, well, knowing about it didn't make it any less exciting. We predicted
No,
it for
still that
years,
really,
and then it,
that
so
really got me still, even though, yeah, we knew it was supposedly coming.
I think it really depends on how they announce it and how far along it is. And like, is like, if they announce it in 2 months and it's a shadow drop and you can play it that day, that's a different thing than if It's like, oh yeah, it's coming. Here we're going to show it. It's out in 2 years. It's out in 3 years. It's out later this year. Like all those things are going to elicit a different response based on how good it looks and how imminent it feels. And that for that we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think. Well, I guess we'll see what happens come June.
Yeah, but I will say both of these pretty cool announcements.
I think
even
so.
as
Yeah.
not a Jet Set Radio guy, historically, always a franchise I thought had a cool aesthetic, and I could definitely, see myself being interested in a remake. And we know I'm a Persona boy, so
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see these in, the next couple weeks as we ramp up for Summer Games Fest.
Yeah.
Would be
Oh, God, is
really
it that
cool.
close? My God.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, it's about 8 weeks out at this point, a little
Oh,
less.
we're over a quarter of the way into the year. Ooh.
I know. It's wild.
Yeah.
It's come and gone quickly.
Wow.
But speaking of come and gone quickly, the beginning of the show has come and gone quickly, and we still have a lot of topics to get through. So let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of April. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valens, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Asobi, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You're all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you want to go support the show just like they did, get your name read on the air, get some extra perks and goodies, whatever you want to do, however you want to show your support, head over to FlipScreen.Games. That's our website where you will find links to all the places you can find us all over the web, all the ways you can show your support. You can become a Patreon supporter. You can go join the Discord and keep the conversation rolling between episodes. You can write into the show for our question block segment. Whatever you want to do, however you want to get involved, you will find a link for it over there. And we appreciate you doing so, however you do. Thank you for joining us here for another episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast. So I'm very excited to talk about this story, Max. I've been wanting to talk about this since they announced it late last week. And it's a real monkey's paw moment for me, Max, because
I bet
PlayStation is allegedly releasing a new handheld. But unfortunately, as much as this is something that I think, quietly wanted for a long time, right? I wasn't clamoring for it, but I was always like, I'd love to see them be crazy enough to try again, right? Like to throw their hat back in the handheld ring. What we're hearing about doesn't quite sound like what I want. It feels like I wished on a monkey paw, and it's that finger is curled, and I'm left with this thing. But we'll talk about it. And I'm excited to hear your thoughts, because I feel like I'm going to talk myself into trying this thing out, and I feel like
why would you do that? Why?
I feel like I need someone to talk me off the ledge. So we'll talk about it. So this report comes from Insider Gaming. And Tom Henderson over at Insider Gaming wrote this report. And I'll let Tom break it down for you. Following days of speculation, Insider Gaming can report that there's a new PlayStation handheld in development. Codenamed the Q-Lite, the next PlayStation handheld is the next piece of Sony hardware that aims to be yet another piece of hardware that requires the PlayStation 5. Insider Gaming understands that the Q-Lite is not a cloud streaming device, but instead uses remote play with the PlayStation 5. And here's my thing. I think I accidentally called it a cloud streaming device
you did
earlier.
At the beginning. I was waiting for you to say it again so I could rip you to shreds. But
I take it back. I misspoke. How different is this really, though? It needs to be online, and it needs to stream over.
I do think it's quite different, because we can talk about why when you finish, but I do think it's just different to a cloud.
We'll talk about it. I'm just saying, at the end of the day, things got to be online, and it's streaming your games.
But a cloud device doesn't roll on a good home network.
I know.
Which makes it even harder barrier for
it. makes this worse. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. It's worse. Yeah. It's worse.
Good. As long as we know.
I misspoke, of course. So we'll call myself out on that one there. But again, instead uses remote play with the PlayStation 5, a feature the console giant has been pushing these last couple weeks, which I don't know that they've been pushing it the last couple of weeks as much as they just put out a YouTube video that kind of explains how it works. But hey,
I think we've pushed it on FlipScreen Games more than Sony has in the last couple of years with our Chiaki video. That's
yeah, I think that's true. But Tom, I get what you're saying. I don't mean to, I'm not trying to throw shade here. I appreciate the reporting. But we have a little bit of details about the actual hardware itself. Again, this is from Tom. Sporting adaptive streaming up to 1080p and 60 FPS, the new device will require constant connectivity to the internet. As for the console's physical features, early prototypes show the console will look a lot like a PlayStation 5 controller, but with a massive 8-inch LCD touchscreen in the center. The device sports adaptive triggers for haptic feedback and will include what you would come to expect from a handheld, volume buttons, speakers, and an audio input jack, etc. A little bit of information about release here. Insider Gaming understands that the Q-Lite is in its QA phase and is scheduled to release before the PlayStation 5 Pro and after the detachable disc drive PS5. And then this kind of ties back to the broader, hardware rumors that have been going on here if you're not keeping up. As previously mentioned by industry insider Jeff Grubb, Sony is planning to announce its quote-unquote second phase of the PS5, which was in reference to its future game slate. Ironically, though, this quote-unquote second phase is very much true for Sony's hardware offerings. With the new detachable disc drive PS5, Project Nomad, which is wireless earphones, Project Voyager, which is a wireless headset, and the Q-Lite handheld, all scheduled to release within a very short period. It's understood that the PlayStation 5 Pro is aiming for a holiday 2024 release. So,
wireless headset. We both have wireless headsets in our hands.
Wearing it right now.
I know you are. I'm confused.
So they said it was earphones. I'm wondering if it's like buds.
There was two. You said it was headphones was Voyager, and there was one after that. It was a wireless headset. That's two different things.
That's true. Yeah. Maybe it's a phase 2 of this device. I don't know. It's interesting though, because it seems this is a wireless Bluetooth headset. So like, what's the difference? But
it's really sorry. Can I finish off? I do think it is weird how much hardware rumors, how many more hardware rumors there seem to be than game rumors for PlayStation. One that people are struggling with. Sony aren't really. There's no real. What's I'm trying to say here? There's not really much of a future in software for the PS5 that we know right now. We know they have one game coming. Other than that, it's a lot of like, oh, could this happen? Would this happen? Blah blah blah. And now we're getting a lot of rumors about hardware. It just seems a bit like, come on, bring me games, give me things to play on these things.
And that's the interesting thing, right? So I think this ties back to the fact that we didn't get a major PlayStation showcase last year, right? And I've talked about it on this show about how there's kind of the tinfoil hat conspiracy that a lot of folks have talked about, is that there was a presentation planned for last year, and that it would have details about some new software and like, peeks at some of the games we know are coming, like stuff like Wolverine, which we only got a cinematic trailer for, but we've never actually seen it, things like that. Getting some updates on those kinds of games. And that the reason it never came is because they've been broiled in this legal battle with Microsoft, right? Where the fact that they're a market leader has been a detriment to their argument of trying to shut down Xbox's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. So some folks have theorized that the reason we didn't get a presentation like that, and the reason we haven't learned more or heard more about the software that Sony has in development, is because they want to keep those cards close to their chest until everything settles, and that they're not, taking advantage of marketing beats at the detriment of their ability to cripple their closest rival, right, in the console space. Whether or not you believe that, is I think up for debate, right? Because the idea that, big marketing presentations like that cost a lot of money, and the idea that one was like done and they just sat on it is like probably not super likely. But it's also like, could they have strategized in that way and decided that they weren't going to talk about those things, and that a few key appearances, like having Neil Druckmann, at Jeff's event to talk about The Last of Us Part 1 and the multiplayer game coming out it's not like they were not present anywhere. It was just not the big blowout we're used to, right? We haven't heard about Spider-Man 2. We haven't heard about Wolverine. We haven't heard about a Ghost of Tsushima 2. What other games are Naughty Dog working on? Like what is the timeline for the next, for what comes next from Guerrilla after the Horizon DLC next month, things like that. Or later this month, actually now.
I think it is. Yeah.
I think there's some stuff that we have no idea what's going on, and there's some where we have a pretty, it's like, I think Ghost of Tsushima 2, right, is a foregone conclusion. But how far into development is that game? How far away are we from seeing something playable? And we really don't know. We don't have a good idea because we haven't had a big presentation like that. But you got to imagine Jeff Grubb has been talking about the fact that like that's coming, right? That they have a big presentation planned. Seemingly, we're going to see some of this hardware at that event. And you got to imagine alongside that is going to be updates on, you
The
know,
games that we've been waiting to hear about. Yeah.
yeah, like a big blowout showing for Spider-Man 2, right? And being
Hmm.
like, what is the story of that game? What is Venom's role in that game beyond the fact that we literally know that he's in it, right? Like things like that. We're going to want to know. And they have those cards to play. I think it's just a matter of, are they ready to play them? And in the last year and change where, you know, the PS5's been selling really good and they had, you know, 2 big releases to talk about and everything. It's like, I don't know that there was a lot of impetus for them to do that. Do you really want to come out and market the big games that are coming a year or two from now when God of War is out in 2 months? Like, probably not, right? You know?
I think you're right.
Um,
Yeah.
but it doesn't make it less frustrating as a fan wanting more news and wanting to know what comes next, you know? And
Yeah, I think that the reason I've been so okay with sort of whoring my PlayStation 5 out the last few months, I guess, at least since Ragnarok, I beat Ragnarok, I've sort of had it in various people's hands because I've not feel like I've been missing anything by not having that system with me because
sure.
I can play all the other games that are on it. Steam Deck, PC, or on Switch, I can just sort of play wherever I want to play them. Just want something new, but that's besides the point because what we want to talk about here is this handheld, right? We want to talk about, you know, what does what does this do to you? You said that you have feelings of you want to give it a go, that you feel like you could be convinced into trying it.
Yeah.
What what about this gets you in the mood to play it or to try it
So
out?
I think the first thing my first thought with it is I hope that this reporting is not totally accurate, right? I hope that there's missing information here. I hope that the device will have some level of functionality offline, things like that.
Mhm.
I can totally understand the idea that it can't, you know, necessarily play something like maybe, you know, God of War Ragnarok natively, right? On a handheld, I think is probably a tall order. So fair enough. But like if this device is literally useless in any environment where I can't rely on both my home internet and the internet of wherever I'm going, its use case is severely limited, right?
Yeah. It's
But
UK isn't even 100% gonna work fine at home. That's what's wild about this, is it's
right.
not, your internet goes down or you have, like, something else downloading on your network or anything is using your network, you're gonna have a worse experience, and I don't know, just bizarre. This sounds, I mean, I wrote in the notes here, this sounds like a disaster, right? Do you agree that in the form that you're currently looking at here, that they've said it is, let's say you're not, so let's say, yeah, that you're nodding, and I like that, because it seems like a complete disaster.
Well, here's my thing. I think the price point is what decides whether or not it's a disaster. Because if it is as we've described, right, and like there's no way for you to get, you know, like because who knows, right? Maybe we go back to the heyday of the Vita, and you can like get 5G internet on it, and then you could
Mhm.
use it anywhere, and then like it becomes more viable, something like that, right? I don't know, but I think even that is like a tall order. Do you really want another device you have to like pay a monthly charge on a game
Mhm.
on? Probably not, right? So maybe that's a stupid idea anyway. But if there are, if it is that limited, but it costs like $150, I
Okay.
don't know that it's DOA because maybe you even just use it as like the way that we use the Steam Deck, right? Where like you use it at home and like
Mhm.
you have your PlayStation 5 downstairs in your living room hooked up to your nice OLED TV, and then upstairs, you know, in your on your nightstand, you have this, you know, the Q light, right? And you're like, oh, you know, I was playing Spider-Man 2 downstairs and I just beat a big story beat and I want to keep playing, but I want to go get in bed. Why don't I do some side missions and, you know, go stop some crimes while I'm in bed, right? And I could see the use case of that. I don't know that it's enough to buy a device dedicated to it, right? But if it's cheap and it is very much marketed as like, no, this is not a handheld gaming console. This is an accessory to the PS5, right? And it
Mhm.
is like a sister device that you're more intended to use, you know, just to take advantage of remote play in your home, you know, or like, you know, like I'm visiting, you know, my parents who live in a place where I know that there's steady Wi-Fi, or I'm going to visit a friend and I know that I can use it at their house, right? Like I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily DOA in that context if it's a really cheap, affordable device that people are like, oh, this is like a cute thing to have, like, and it has a very limited use case, but that's the purpose of it, right? Because
Yeah. I
like
think
one of the things
$150.
I saw you put in the notes, right, is like bringing up the backbone, right,
Mhm.
where you can use the backbone with a phone, right, and it's like, why would you want this device then? And I think for me, I don't like playing games on my phone. I borrowed a backbone from a friend. I tried to use it multiple times, and it just didn't click with me, right? Because it's like I'm there, I'm trying to play a game, I'm getting text messages, I'm getting notifications, the power on my phone's draining, and then I'm getting, a notification about that. And I, it's not a device that I can really get into a serious, meaty AAA game like that on.
Okay,
It
yeah.
doesn't feel right.
Also, I guess a smaller screen at that point, as
Mm-hmm.
well. You've only got sort of like a 7-inch. You're an iPhone person? You're an Android person? I don't even know what phone you
I'm
have.
a Android. Like I've got a Samsung, so I've got a pretty big screen. But even
Yeah.
so, it's like it's not as
Yeah, you're probably looking at like, what, 6.5 inches, maybe 7 inches, something like that. I mean, the
yeah,
Steam Deck's
probably.
7 inches, so it's probably even smaller than that. But yeah, even then, that is a 16 by 10 device, so you're already losing like a
Yep.
section of it either side anyway. Um, so not even six. Sorry, not 16 by 10. 19 by 9. Hang
I'm
on a
gonna
minute.
tell you what. I don't remember, but I know what you're talking about. Right? It's the with the phone dimensions, you're losing some of the width.
Yeah, yeah,
The
yeah,
top
yeah.
width, or not top. You know what I'm saying? The height.
We're both struggling here.
We're both
Uh,
talking in circles, but and those are enough reasons, right,
yeah,
to make it that I
19
don't
by
use
9.
that.
It's 19 by 9, the
19 by 9.
newer devices. So yeah, there we go.
Those limitations are enough for me to not take advantage of them, right? So I didn't buy a backbone for myself because I was like, I'll never use this thing.
Yeah.
Cool idea. And if you get use out of it, cool. And like I saw people in our Discord who were like, this is ridiculous. I would never use this. I think it was Olaf who was like, oh, like, haha, the adaptive triggers. Like, you know what else has adaptive triggers? My PlayStation 5 DualSense when I connect it to my iPad. And
Mhm.
that's how I do remote play. That's the thing though. Not everybody has an iPad. Not everybody has multiple devices like that. Maybe you don't want to carry your iPad and a controller and you want to just have a little thing you can take on the go. Like I think the thing is the less you think about this as a dedicated handheld device or a machine that's supposed to appeal to everybody, and the more you think of it as a niche accessory that's supposed to be niche and is only supposed to serve a specific audience, and it costs less, and it's an easy point of entry, maybe. Maybe there is a reality where this thing makes sense for a segment of the audience. And if PlayStation's comfortable with that, of making a niche device for a niche user, then cool, I guess, right? Like whatever. But I don't know though, man. Like I think it has a far more likelihood to go down the road that you're talking about, where it just doesn't, it's not enough to speak to anybody. And it is this kind of weird thing that languishes, kind of like the PS TV was, where it's like,
Yeah.
this is cool or whatever, but who needs this? Like, who's this for?
I think you putting it at like the $150 mark, so that's £120. It's around the cost of 2 DualSense controllers, right? So you've got all of the DualSense stuff packed
Yeah.
inside. Then you've also got sort of a screen Wi-Fi connected. It's like, this, there's more in it, but it's not processing. It's not memory. It's not all of this stuff that is quite, the pricier parts. I can legitimately see that being a viable price point. I do think there's going to be marketing and things, and I think that the fact they know they're only going to sell X number of them. I think that raises the price a little bit because um, you're going to want to get more for what it is.
Yeah. If you're
Is
not mass producing it, that
Yeah,
is going to influence its ability to be a cheaper entry point.
yes, and I think that if that is the case, then I do think there is an audience for it. I think if it's that price, however, I do have a feeling that it's not going to be that price, and that what we're actually going to see, excuse me, is it's going to end up being $200-300 to set, or closer to the price of the controller. What was it called? The adaptive controller,
Oh
the
yeah, I
Edge,
forget what it's
DualSense
called, but
Edge,
it's
or
like the
whatever it's
DualSense
called.
Pro controller. Yeah, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the if it's going to be closer in price to that, then I think we're going to have the audience for it, the potential audience for it is gonna be shrunk because people are just
My
gonna
thing
say,
is,
"Go on."
if it costs that much,
Mhm.
why? Right? Like it's got to have guts in it that warrant that expense. And then is there a possibility that it does have more offline functionality than none? Right?
Okay.
Like if it, I don't know. Because
You
I
have to imagine that if it's not doing games processing, you have to imagine it has to run an OS. It has to run an OS to be able to function. You
right
can't just turn it on and it hooks. It's not like the Wii U gamepad where it hooks up via Wi-Fi directly to the system. It has to have an OS to be able to make that connection. You have to be able to go
and
through
receive
menus,
the
change
signal.
settings, exactly all these sorts of things, right? So it's going to have at least a tablet in there, right? And at that point, I can play if I wanted to. I could put Chiaki on my Steam Deck, as we've shown you how to do. I could on my phone play it. I could on a laptop or a computer. I could just remote play on there. Like there's so many devices to do remote play on, or I could buy a very cheap tablet, and if not a backbone controller, there are going to be controllers and grips and things I've used to do my dual
Yeah.
sense with my phone. There are going to be so many options. You can take away notifications. There'll be different things you can do that that makes this incredibly niche if it's not that cheap. I think as soon as that price
Yeah.
goes above as soon as that price becomes more than the cost of a dual sense and a Amazon Fire tablet that you can remote play to, or any Amazon tablet, um, $100 you're looking at this. As soon as it's over $170, because I think that's the price of like a cheap tablet and
In a dual
um,
sense.
yeah. Then again, you're also then thinking 1080p, 60 FPS. Can you get
That's the
those on
thing.
those? Can
That's
you
the
get
thing is
those on
I
a
don't if it does hit that price point, like that 150 to 175 price point, I don't think there's a more affordable way for you to achieve 1080p 60 FPS because the tablets that you're going to buy at that price range are probably not capable of that.
Okay, so I've got here Lenovo 3rd gen 10.1 inch. So it's bigger screen, which makes it probably
Okay.
more cumbersome, right? 64 gigabyte Wi-Fi tablet, 129.99. That's pounds. So that's probably $150, let's say, around there, maybe a little bit more
Sure.
than that. So then when you tack on the price of the controller, yeah, that's going to end up being sort of 200 and what, $220 maybe. So that is, that
Yeah.
is going to be a bit quite a
Maybe
bit.
a little more
But
after tax and everything.
yes, but that is also a 10.1 screen. So if I was to maybe say 1080p 8-inch tablet, let's see if we can knock that price down a little bit more.
Well, don't forget 60 FPS though as well. Like it's got to have a good refresh rate.
Yeah, don't worry. Okay, so Samsung Galaxy A7 Lite,
Okay.
8.7 inch, so you're getting closer to the. So, I mean, it's only a 800 pixels. Okay, the
This is
Lenovo
the thing.
one
This is the
is a
thing is
1200.
it's
Yeah.
it's it's not a niche, but if it can hit this price point, it exists in a Venn diagram that serves a user. And don't get me
Mhm.
wrong, in your scenario, maybe you're spending a little bit more, right, for a better tablet, but then you also have a tablet that has like additional functionality beyond
Yeah.
remote play, whereas this is a
Yep.
very niche device that will only do this one thing. But it's
Yep.
also like, I don't know, do you care about that? Like if you're not a big reader, if you're not a big tablet person, do you need the extra functionality of a tablet if all you want to do on it is remote play anyway? Then it's
Yep.
like, would 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 you not be better served by a dedicated device that is maybe a little more affordable?
So maybe what could be the other way to add more value to the PlayStation device is that it is also, um, it has the streaming capabilities of the Netflix. You know how on your PlayStation you'll watch Netflix, you'll watch Amazon, all of these sort of things. If you could have those streaming capabilities on this device for you're on the train, maybe you want to play some games. Oh, okay, now I'm having a bit of an issue with connecting to my PlayStation. That's fine because I've still got Wi-Fi on it and I'm still connected to the internet through my phone. Therefore, I can still watch Netflix or whatever. Maybe even then you like the same way that we spoke about using the Steam Deck, where you get to where you're going to and you plug this thing into your TV, so you're using your PS5 on the TV in a hotel, let's say, with a DualSense controller you brought
Yeah.
with you. But is that also that could also be your media center, which are
And
again are all things that tablets can do. But
the other thing
um,
too is like, is there a possibility that eventually they do add some kind of cloud streaming support through Chiaki where like you can play if you have PlayStation Plus, you can play those streamed PS3 games and you can stream them
mhm,
to this device. Like, and again, a lot of this is speculative because all we have is rumors. We don't know the price point. We don't know what the full functionality is going to be. But I think all these things are things where you can see if a few of these things are true, you can more and more see where this device carves out a niche for itself for at least the core PlayStation audience.
Mhm.
Is this a device that has the broad appeal of like a Steam Deck or a Switch or something like that? No, I wouldn't think so. But it doesn't sound like that's what they're trying to do. Like they did that, and it doesn't seem like they want to do that again, which is a shame. I think I'd love to see them. I personally think a new PlayStation Portable would be a bigger success than PSVR 2. Like
Yeah,
I think
yeah, I think
I
so.
think the handheld wave is kind of coming back.
Now, I said this to Steve last week, right? We had a question, or not last week, week before. We had a question on this very show 2 weeks ago from, it must have been from Discord. Pilkey is the name of the person who sent the question in. The question was, do you think the chance that the success of the Switch and Steam Deck will prompt Sony or Microsoft to get back into handhelds, especially ones that function as hybrids?
Yes, here we
Now,
are.
I said, I think it's more likely that Sony will do it. And Steve said, no, 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 there's no way it will happen, blah, blah, blah. Maybe the way that I'd explained it uh, wasn't the way that it's now happening now. But number one, I just want to rub it in Steve's face that I was right. If this comes out to be true, that it is Sony, and also to be proven right so quickly within a week of us recording and talking
Within
about
a
it.
week
So
of your
for a Sony rumor to come out and immediately prove me right, I love it. But the actual point here is that while I was talking about that, what I said was that Sony has spent a lot of time uh, with some success and some failure, putting their games on PC. They've recently they've put Days Gone, God of War, Spider-Man. Most recently, we've had issues with The Last of Us, but they have experience and they have partners that can help them put their games on PC, but also work on scaling their games. These games are games that work fine on the Steam Deck. God of War runs fine on the Steam Deck. They use Spider-Man, Miles Morales to advertise the Steam Deck quite often. People often talk about those as like the most worth it Steam Deck games because you can play these AAA games on the go in a sort of a very playable quality. Sony now has this at their fingertips. The more games they release for PC, the more games they have available for their own handheld device. If they were to release like a Vita 2 or something that was maybe more powerful, closer in power to the Steam Deck, could they maybe scale their games down and instead of struggle to run their full games on there, maybe they could create versions of the games that are not only scaled the same way that PC ones are, but also tinkered and perfectly what's the word I'm looking for here? Refined? Come on,
like
help me out here.
optimized.
Optimized, thank you. Optimized specifically for that device, right? I think it's very possible,
Yeah,
and I feel like it wouldn't be not possible with this device, but I feel like if they were to do a new PS Vita, I think you said a new PS Vita will be more successful than the VR2. 100% I agree because you have all of these games that could work on it, and it's
right.
less niche and
And
yeah.
I think that's the thing though, is like where the problem comes in for that is like when you are talking about like a more, PSP3, right, type device.
Mhm.
If it doesn't have that parity or at least enough parity with the PlayStation 5 where you can have games like Horizon or God of War or whatever work on it in a reduced capacity where it's like, okay, it's 1080p, it's 30 FPS, right, whatever. However much you need to tune it down for it to run. Um you run into the situation that even Nintendo moved away from, right? Which is you have to support two consoles and two libraries.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's tenable anymore. I think if PlayStation is going to enter the handheld console space, like it needs to be something that is more like a companion device and is something that, can play the games you're playing on your PS5 on the go. And if it
Mhm.
if it isn't that, then I think they're going to struggle to support it the way they need to, which is why I think they're going down this route. Is that this is, it's not as committal, right? It is like, oh, this is just like a cool little accessory you can get, and it works with your PS5, and we don't need to have a software library for it or talk about it at every event or worry how it's stacking up to the competition. It can just be its own thing,
Mhm.
and I don't know whether or not that is something that can work. I think is going to be really dependent on its price and how Sony markets it and how reliable the performance is. Because I've not really spent a lot of time with remote play, but it works very well. Like you said, we have our most successful tutorial here on the channel of how you can do it with your Steam Deck, and it works great, and a lot of people do it. A lot of people do the backbone thing on their phone. A lot of people do it with the PS Vita to this day, and it's a great
A
experience.
a lot of people do that? Do a lot of
A
people
lot
do it
of
at its
a lot of
peak?
big PlayStation dorks, I'll say.
Alright, fine, that's better.
So, you know, I am very interested to see the specs on this device and what it's really capable of. But I'd be lying if I said I was excited about it. I have a
Mhm.
morbid curiosity in it, is I think where I'm
Yeah,
landing.
I think I've been quite positive about it while I'm talking about it. I still think this is a ridiculous idea. I still think it's something that, uh, if it's in the form that that Insider Gaming has listed it as, I think this is a dumb product, and I think it deserves to not deserves to fail, but I feel like it needs refining before they release it. And I think they need to take on the feedback. Unless they're very confident in people this is for, they're confident in their price point, and they're going to say, no, we know who this is for. We know these people exist. So we're releasing it as is. Fine. Great. That people who want a new PS Vita might cry about it, might be a bit upset about it, but that's fine because this isn't that product. This is a different product. However, I
Right.
still think that the product as it is relies far too much on people having like a fantastic internal setup for their own internet, then also being on a great bit of Wi-Fi. Because I've never been able to get remote play working great on Steam Deck, on my phone, on anything. And I don't know if that's anything to do with my internet or whether I've tried it. Who knows? I've always struggled with it. I've tried multiple different streaming apps. I've tried all sorts of things. And my PS5 just, it would start, then it would just look awful and play awful. And it's just not an experience I want. And I feel like it would be a shame for people to be experiencing games like, let's use Ragnarok as an example. It'd be a shame if they were playing Ragnarok in choppy, um, it might say 1080p because the screen's 1080p, but it's actually like a blurry, you know, juttery mess. And I feel
Yeah.
like that would be most people's use case or most people's experience with this.
Not to mention, I think it doesn't feel nearly as bad to have that kind of experience on like the Steam Deck or on your phone or whatever, like where it's a device where like you're taking advantage of it for free and like maybe you invested in a backbone, maybe you did this, maybe you did that, but the idea of being like, I bought this dedicated device from Sony for this purpose and it still
Yeah,
doesn't work is not
yeah,
a good look. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's in QA, right? I think hopefully if this is what they think makes sense, they're confident that they have the technology figured out and that it's going to be a viable experience for a large enough part of the consumer base, because for certain folks, it'll just never be viable just based on what their internet is like. And that's unfortunate, but it's a reality of cloud gaming and streaming and all this stuff that we're moving towards, right? Like if that's going to be a big part of the future of games, a lot of places internet infrastructure needs to change, and we know this, right? Like there's parts of New York City where you wouldn't be able to get this to work, and it's one of the biggest cities in the world, right? Like it's not. I think people think of it as being like, oh, you live in a country with worse internet, or you live in a rural area in the middle of nowhere, or whatever. No, like there are people in some of the most populated spaces in the world that are not going to be able to take advantage of this stuff the way that they should.
yeah.
Um,
Big
so
for
we'll see.
Japan, this, I think. I think this would be a big thing. This would be big in Japan.
I could
Uh,
see that.
yeah, which I think has had a big sort of influx of PS5 stuff, and the Switch is very popular over there.
Handheld gaming in general,
Exactly, yeah.
has always been kind of a cultural thing over there. So
Yeah, so I think you combine the 2 and you do get a success, but that's also success in one market, and it's not a massive market. It's just a market that regularly releases data, which I think is why people like to use Japan as like a way of gauging how well things are doing. But it's not a massive market in the grand scheme of things. So
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing though, right? Is like how successful does this need to be for Sony to look at it as a success is the ultimate question. And we'll definitely see. Hopefully, we'll have news on it in the next couple weeks as we get into the Summer Games Fest.
Yes, we
Because I
will.
would
Oh,
certainly love
hopefully.
to see this thing for real, whatever it looks like.
Yeah, me too.
All right, so we're going to close things out today with another news story that is probably a developing story, probably a thing that we'll come back to as it continues to develop, but one that we thought was worth touching on for today. So, Savvy Games has acquired Scopely.
Everyone loses their shit in the audience at this news, right? I
What?
can't believe
How
I
could it
can't believe it's
happen?
happened. Like,
Scopely acquired.
no way. By Savvy Games as well. That's amazing. Oh my
Unbelievable.
god.
All right,
Oh my
Max. So
god.
here's the thing. You put the show notes together today. You wrote a cute little thing here. If you have no idea what this means, I don't blame you, but stick with me. I'm
Now,
sticking with you. Give me
here's
the
a little
story.
star here, is that I also had no idea what this means when I read it, and I thought, why is this newsworthy? I don't know who these people are, but I did a little bit of information. I did a little bit of research. You know, there's got to be something. You know, there's got to be a reason people are talking about it. So
You're out
I'll
here
give you the
muck raking. Give me the muck.
I am. Here's the mark. Okay, so Savvy Games, they're a Saudi Arabia owned video games and esports company that is currently being run by the former head of worldwide studios at Activision Blizzard. Now I've never heard of this company. You'd think that, you know, the CEO of Activision Blizzard would go on to a company you might have heard of. No, I've not heard of him. I even sort of said, "Has anyone heard of this?" to a friend of mine. No idea. I'm assuming you've never heard of him, Pete, right? No?
No, not before today.
No. No. So Scopely, maybe you might have heard of them, right? Scopely are a company. They make mobile games. That's their bread and butter. They make mobile games. They maybe the games aren't huge. You might not know some of their games. You would have definitely heard of one of them. But they work with huge IP. Star Trek.
We'll call it out. We'll call it out because they're the 3 games listed here. There's one of them that I know is a big game, right?
Yes, I think you're going to say that's Marvel.
Fleet Command.
Yeah,
sure. Marvel Strike Force. That's a big one. We know Marvel Strike
Force.
Force.
I know of. Yes, yeah,
sure.
And then the other one's Yahtzee with Buddies, which I think is one of their bigger ones, but I don't know it. They've also got a Fall Guys knockoff. There's a few. Yeah, Where's Your Friends? Yeah, good point. There's a few of these games that are like big IPs, and here's a sort of a mobile game version of this. They've got a pretty hefty portfolio of these mobile games.
Pause.
Okay.
Right now, Max, you look like a monster for the
YouTube
you've turned into a pixelated beast of some kind. So we're gonna you're back.
Yeah, you were very pixelated for me as well a second while I was saying that. I was worried.
Okay, I was gonna cut. I was gonna cut for a second and fix it, but I think we're all right. So why don't you pick
up? How do I
look
now? Do I look all right now?
It's pristine.
Perfect. Good. I did see some stats about some of the Scopely games. Did a little bit of looking up. Things like Marvel Force, Star Trek, Fleet Command. These make huge numbers a day. They're making like hundreds of thousands of dollars a day for this company. So they're sort of raking in. So why is this news of these two companies that no one's ever heard of making games that some people have heard of, but you know, only because of their IP really? Like, why is this worth mentioning at the end of this show? Why did I even put it quite high in the show and then sort of push it down as we'd found more things? That's because Savvy Games paid $4.6 billion for Scopely, right?
Woo!
Which is a big amount, right? To put that into perspective for you, this is the 6th biggest video game acquisition of all time.
Wild.
I could drag the list out and read them all if you want, but this is more than Sony paid for Bungie. Was it last year or the year before? Which was 3.6 billion, and it's more than Microsoft paid for Mojang, and Facebook paid for Oculus, which was 2.5 billion and 2 billion respectively combined. So those two companies paid for those two other big companies and paid less than this one company that you've never heard of have bought another company you've never heard of.
That's my question: is where did Savvy Games get $4.6 billion?
There's got to be the fact that it's sort of Saudi Arabian owned. You can also imagine that these are the same companies that are putting money into Nintendo at the moment, and they're just sort of generally putting a lot of money in stock in video games at the moment.
Yeah, right. That's true. I know that the government has made a lot of investments in gaming, and so they're probably an angel investor for this.
Yes,
but I guess it's a nuts one, right? Because you look at some of these, and I'm always surprised by this, where it's like, 4.6. It's like, how could this possibly be worth more than Destiny? How could this possibly be worth more than than Minecraft, right?
Yeah.
And I think the answer is that it probably isn't, right? Like I would say, like, worth more than Minecraft at least is like, that's wild. I think that's more an example of Microsoft underpaying for Mojang than not, right? That said, when you add the context that these things are raking in hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, it adds up, right? Like Marvel Strike Force probably prints money. Oh,
that was a day.
Oh my god!
Out there. Yeah, 100,000 a day. Wait, hang on. Let me just confirm that before I.
So you go ahead and I'll wrap up the reporting here. So, yeah, I mean, I think when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, right? It speaks to how much money there is in mobile gaming. Mm-hmm. And like, we as core gamers, I think we don't really think about mobile like that. You know, it's obviously a part of the industry, but and I've said this in the past, and I don't mean it with derision, I mean it with sincerity. I think mobile gaming is kind of akin to video games as pornography is to like Hollywood, right?
Yeah,
Where it's like tons of money in it, very important to a lot of players, right? But not necessarily like the pricing model is different, the attraction model is different. It's like, sure, you're
yeah,
making money off video games, but it's really a different beast. And I think it's why you've seen a lot of traditional um makers, right? Like the Nintendos of the world fail and step back because it's just a totally different animal. And
yeah.
like the success that it takes to market a, traditional AAA single player game or a, always online games as a service multiplayer game
Hmm.
is a lot different than a mobile game.
Yes, I agree. Though I would love to see a Quentin Tarantino porno. I'm sure that would be a great if they ever were to pull that off.
There'd
I
be a
just
lot of
found.
feet in it, I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, there would. I found the figures for you. I'll list off the three that I've listed in the thing that I thought we were talking about: Star Trek, Marvel Strike Force, and Yahtzee. Okay, there we go.
Uh-huh.
So Star Trek Fleet Command makes an average of $310,000 a day. Marvel Strike Force makes an average of $235,000 a day, and Yahtzee with Buddies makes an average of $168,000 a day. And those are just
Holy
sort of like that's
moly.
three of their, even their oh, wow, even their Fall Guys knockoff, Stumble Guys, seems to make on average $231,000 a day, and I've
Okay, real
never
quick.
heard of it.
Real quick. Feed me those numbers again.
Okay, Star Trek Fleet Command, 310,000 a day.
Okay.
Marvel Strike Force, 235,000 a day.
I can't believe that makes less than the Star Trek game that I've never heard of, but okay, go ahead.
Maybe it's more grossly monetized. Who knows?
Sure, maybe.
And then I was using Yahtzee with Buddies as an example. I'm actually going to change that to this Stumble Guys because it makes 231,000 a day.
Give me Yahtzee in there just for the sake of.
Go on, N. 186,000 a day.
Okay. So that's all. That's $962,000 a day,
Okay.
right?
Times
So
that.
then let's
Times that.
and we're doing like rough napkin math here, right? So multiply that by 30. That's $28,000,000, 280. Sorry. Just wipe that clean slate. $28,860,000 a month
A month.
based on those games alone.
So I suppose that, yeah,
And
maybe
again,
this is
right,
a viable purchase.
the app stores are taking a cut of that. They're paying taxes on it. It's not all profit, but
they're paying Marvel, they're paying Star Trek, like they're
but
taking
like
money.
man alive though, that's still a lot of money. Like in a year, you're racking it up.
Yep. And I think that do you think these companies buy them based on their portfolio alone as is, or do you think there are even more things planned? Maybe they have more
Probably
IP under
both,
their belt that they're allowed to
right?
use, Yeah.
Like I think you think of we've talked a lot about the Activision Blizzard
Mhm.
acquisition, and it's funny, right? Because whenever you talk about it, you say the Activision Blizzard acquisition, but what you don't think about is King, and which is
Activision
the
Blizzard
thing
King.
I think is really a big part of what Xbox wants, right? Because obviously they
Mhm.
want Call of Duty, obviously they want the BattleNet, the Blizzard stuff, but like King makes an insane amount of money, right? And again,
Mhm.
on our list of all-time highest acquisitions, Activision paid 5.9 billion for it, right? Because Candy Crush and some of those other games, like they make money hand over
Yeah.
fist,
I
right?
think that's number 5. I think this Savvy Games Scopely purchase is just underneath Activision buying King for 5.9 billion, which is wild. And I
Yeah,
think it makes you know, this is I think Steve said it a lot that people aren't talking about streaming and the mobile stuff. Those are the two things people aren't really talking about when it comes to this Xbox thing. And I think that as we go forward, now that Call of Duty's out the way and we go forward and we want to start talking more about the streaming and about the mobile stuff, I think we're going to see a lot of this kind of thing. I think we're going to touch on this a few more times. I think when we have to remind
probably.
people why they're so pressed over Candy Crush. And I think it's these kind of figures.
And it's so funny, right? Because like that's not at all part of the conversation of the concern, right? Like the where they're getting tripped up is the Activision Blizzard and the dominance over the console space, because like at the end of the day, like I don't think there's so many of these big mobile companies that are out there making games that print money that you don't know their names, and they don't have that level of market recognition and cachet, even though they're making $28 million a month on 4 games. It's like that's nuts. That's quite a healthy player base.
Yep,
So
wild. And I'm glad that you got as much enjoyment out of this little tidbit of news as I did, because I was just
this is
reading
an
through the
interesting
figures
one.
like,
yeah.
what? No way. And I almost didn't include it. I was almost like, nah, like it's there's no headline here, but the headline's the worst bit.
It's one of those things where it's like, okay, like the headlines, whatever, but then you get into and it's like every other sentence, you're like, what the fuck? Really?
Yeah.
Like it's like the first time you ever found out that Roblox makes like billions of dollars a year, and you're like, what is this thing that I don't even, it's like I've never heard about it, and it's just out here lurking, making money hand over fist. And for like the savvy games and the Xboxes of the world, like they smell that blood in the water and they want a piece of that pie, for sure. And it makes sense why you see Nintendo partnering with DNA to continue to make mobile games, even though they've struggled, even though they've taken a step back, because like there's money to be made here if you can figure it out. We know PlayStation is trying to make more mobile games and trying to expand their mobile efforts, right? We see Xbox trying to buy King here so they can do the same thing. Yeah, weirdly enough, it feels like mobile has been like the next frontier in games for like forever, right? Like it's for the longest time. It's like, oh, you got to figure out how to tap into mobile. You got to figure out how you get your mobile strategy figured out, because there's all this money to be made. And for the companies that can figure it out, clearly so, right? There's a $4.6 billion buyout if you play your cards right.
Yeah.
Wild stuff, man.
Let's make a mobile game, Pete. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's pivot. And we'll be a mobile studio. Let's do it. We got the talent.
Oh, yeah.
All right, guys. So thank you for tuning in for another episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast. If you want to write in and let us know what you think about a new Jet Set Radio, a Persona 3 remake, a PlayStation not cloud, remote play, Wi-Fi enabled handheld streaming device. Okay.
Thank you.
Or just the insane money to be made in the mobile market, or anything else we've ever talked about on this show. Remember, you can hit us up at questions@flipscreen.games. You can come join our Discord where the conversation keeps rolling between episodes. You can go become a Patreon supporter and get early access to the show and a bunch of other perks and goodies. And you can find links to all that and much, much more over at flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can find all the ways to get involved, however you choose to get involved. We thank you for tuning in for another episode of the FlipScreen Games Podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's over there. He's been Max. We'll see you next week.